The world gave Ukraine billions of dollars and endless tears. Sudan got silence. The only thing that changed was the color of the skin. I want you to do something before this video starts. I want you to close your eyes for just 5 seconds and picture this. 400,000 people dead, 14 million people forced out of their homes, 25 million people, half an entire country, facing starvation right now. 70% of all children under the age of 5 severely malnourished. Mass graves so large they are visible from space. Refugee camps being bombed while doctors are being murdered inside them. Famine officially declared in at least 10 locations. Now open your eyes. Can you name the country I just described? Most people cannot. Most people have never heard about it on the news. Most people have no idea this is happening right now in the year 2026. The country is Sudan, and what is happening there is not just a war. According to the United States government, it is a genocide. Today, we are not just going to talk about Sudan. We are going to ask the question that the entire world is too uncomfortable to answer. Why does the world care so deeply about some wars and completely ignore others? And when we look at the answer, honestly, what we find will disturb every single one of us. Part 1. What is actually happening in Sudan? The war in Sudan began on April 15, 2023. Two military generals who had previously worked together to overthrow a civilian government turned on each other in a violent power struggle. On one side is the Sudanese Armed Forces, the official national military. On the other side is a group called the Rapid Support Forces, a powerful paramilitary organization that was built from the bones of a militia called the Janjaweed. That same Janjaweed had already committed genocide in the Darfur region of Sudan between 2003 and 2008, killing hundreds of thousands of non-Arab civilians, displacing millions and committing mass rape as a weapon of war. The RSF is led by a general known as Hemeti, a man who became one of Sudan's wealthiest people by seizing control of gold mines and selling that gold to the United Arab Emirates. In January 2025, the United States government officially declared that the RSF and its allied militias had committed genocide against non-Arab ethnic communities in Sudan. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated that RSF forces had carried out the systematic murder of men and boys, even infants, on the basis of their ethnicity. That the same forces had deliberately targeted women and girls from specific ethnic groups for rape and sexual slavery, and that they had prevented civilians from accessing food and medical supplies, using starvation as a weapon of war. This is not a conflict. This is not a civil dispute. This is a genocide, and it has been going on for nearly 3 years. Part 2. The numbers that should stop your breath. Let us talk about the numbers, because the numbers are the only thing that can truly show us the scale of what is happening. The former United States Special Envoy for Sudan estimated that up to 400,000 people have been killed since the war began in April 2023. That is not a typo. 400,000 human beings. 14 million people have been forced from their homes, making Sudan the site of the largest displacement crisis on the entire planet Earth right now. Of those 14 million displaced, more than half are children. 25 million people, exactly half of Sudan's entire population, are currently facing acute food insecurity. Famine has been officially confirmed in at least 10 separate locations inside Sudan, including the Zimzam camp, which was home to 400,000 displaced people before it was attacked, besieged, and starved. According to Doctors Without Borders, over 70% of children under the age of 5 in conflict areas are severely malnourished. Over 80% of hospitals in conflict zones are non-operational. A cholera outbreak has spread across the country, causing over 120,000 confirmed cases and more than 3,500 deaths. 10 million children are out of school. The WHO Director General has stated that Sudan is the only place in the entire world currently classified as experiencing famine. Read every single one of those numbers again, because these are not statistics. Every single number represents a human life. Part 3. Now, let us talk about Ukraine. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, the reaction from the Western world was immediate, massive, and emotional. News channels ran Ukraine coverage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. European countries opened their borders and welcomed Ukrainian refugees with warmth and generosity. Western governments announced billions of dollars in aid within days. eventually totaling over $175 billion from the United States alone. Politicians gave powerful speeches. Celebrities changed their profile pictures. The word solidarity was everywhere. And let me be very clear. The suffering of Ukrainian people was and is completely real. Russia's invasion was and is a genuine crime. Ukrainian lives absolutely matter. I am not here to diminish Ukrainian suffering for even 1 second, but I am here to ask you one question. Where is that same energy for Sudan? Where are the 24-hour news cycles for Sudan? Where are the billions of dollars for Sudan? Where are the celebrities changing their profile pictures for Sudan? Where are the emotional speeches from Western leaders about the genocide happening in Sudan? Because the numbers tell us something deeply uncomfortable. Sudan has more dead than Ukraine. Sudan has more displaced than Ukraine. Sudan has more people starving than Ukraine has people total. And yet the silence around Sudan compared to the noise around Ukraine is so deafening that it can only mean one thing. Some suffering counts more than others. And the question we must ask is why? Part 4. The words that exposed everything. When Ukraine was invaded, Western journalists said things on live international television that revealed exactly what many people in powerful newsrooms privately believe. A CBS News senior correspondent standing in Kyiv said these words. He said, "This is not a place like Iraq or Afghanistan that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European city." He later apologized, but the word was already out. Civilized. An NBC News correspondent said on camera that Ukrainian refugees are white and Christian and very similar to us, drawing a direct contrast with refugees from other parts of the world. A journalist from Al Arabiya television reporting from Poland said these refugees do not look like refugees from Syria or Iraq. They are Christian, they are white. They look just like any European family. The World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, himself an African, publicly asked whether the world is truly treating the human race the same way. He asked openly whether the world gives equal attention and equal value to black lives and white lives. These are not the words of protesters on the street. These are words of journalists on major international networks and the head of the most important global health organization in the world. And they were telling us something that the data has since completely confirmed. Part 5. The data does not lie. A major research study published in early 2026 analyzed over 78,000 news articles covering the world's 10 biggest humanitarian crises. The findings were devastating. Ukraine received an average of 19.4 international news articles per day. Gaza received 58.5 articles per day. Sudan, the world's largest humanitarian crisis by almost every single measure, received a fraction of that sustained attention. Chad, another African nation in catastrophic crisis, received just 0.06 articles per day. Not 6, not 0.6, 0.06. That is one article every 16 days for a country full of human beings dying of starvation and violence. And it gets worse when we look at political attention. The previous US president tweeted about Israel or Gaza at least 107 times in just 6 months after October 7, 2023. In the entire first year of Sudan's war, he tweeted about Sudan exactly 4 times. 3 of those 4 tweets were about evacuating American citizens from Sudan, not about Sudanese civilians dying, not about the famine, not about the genocide, about getting Americans out. A senior expert at the International Crisis Group said it directly. He said, "You cannot help but watch the level of focus on crises like Gaza and Ukraine and wonder what just 5% of that energy could have done in Sudan and how many thousands of lives it could have saved." Part 6. Who is fueling this war and why the world stays silent? Here is the part of this story that explains why so many powerful countries prefer to look away from Sudan. This war is not just a local power struggle. It is a proxy war with the fingerprints of multiple international players all over it. Egypt and Iran back the Sudanese armed forces. The United Arab Emirates has been found by international investigators to be shipping weapons to the RSF rebels, despite publicly denying any involvement. Sudan has now filed a case against the UAE at the International Court of Justice, accusing it of complicity in genocide. Russia, through its mercenary networks, has also been linked to supporting the RSF. The RSF primarily funds its military operations through gold exports directly to the UAE. Sudan is one of Africa's largest gold producers, so while Sudanese children are dying of starvation in bombed refugee camps, international players are buying gold, selling weapons, and keeping their chosen side supplied and fighting. The same Western governments that make passionate speeches about human rights and the rules-based international order are maintaining warm trade relationships and diplomatic partnerships with the countries that are arming a genocidal militia in Sudan. The IMF chief, Kristalina Georgieva, publicly stated that the Sudanese conflict has been largely overshadowed by hostilities in other parts of the world such as Ukraine and Gaza. Overshadowed, that is the word the head of the International Monetary Fund used to describe a genocide killing 400,000 people. Part 7. The genocide that became routine. In October 2025, the city of El Fasher, the last major urban center in Sudan's North Darfur region that had not fallen to the RSF, was overrun after an 18-month siege. Reports and footage that emerged after the fall showed widespread massacres of civilians. Around 1,500 people were killed in the immediate aftermath, and 90,000 more were displaced in just days. Genocide Watch, a leading international organization that tracks genocide risk around the world, has declared that Sudan has now reached Stage 9 of the 10 stages of genocide. Stage 9 is called extermination. Only Stage 10 remains. And Stage 10 is called denial. 84 people were killed at prayer in a single RSF missile strike on a mosque in El Fasher. Not 84 soldiers. 84 people praying. Mass graves containing over 500 unmarked bodies were discovered near a detention center operated by the RSF close to Khartoum. Satellite imagery showed what researchers from Yale University believe to be evidence of human bodies in mass graves across Darfur. And still the world's major news networks ran other stories. And still the billions of dollars that flowed so easily to Ukraine did not flow to Sudan. Part 8. What needs to change? The people of Sudan do not need our pity. They need our attention. And they need that attention to translate into pressure on the governments and institutions that have the power to act. International media needs to cover Sudan with the same urgency and consistency it gives to conflicts in Europe. Western governments need to enforce the arms embargo against countries supplying weapons to both sides of this conflict. The UAE needs to be held accountable for its documented role in arming a genocidal paramilitary force. The United Nations Security Council needs to dedicate serious and sustained attention to Sudan. Not occasional statements, but real action. Humanitarian aid convoys need safe passage guaranteed and enforced. Aid workers need protection. And every single person watching this video needs to understand that silence is a choice. Ignorance about Sudan is no longer an excuse because you now know. The question is what you do with what you know. Conclusion. I want to end with a simple comparison that I believe every human being on this planet should sit with quietly. When Ukraine was invaded, the phrase that spread across the entire world was simple and powerful. We stand with Ukraine. Flags were added to profile pictures. Fundraisers raised millions overnight. Borders were opened. Governments mobilized. The world moved. Now ask yourself honestly, when did you last see anyone say we stand with Sudan? 400,000 dead, 14 million displaced, 25 million people facing starvation right now, 70% of children under 5 malnourished, doctors being murdered in the last functioning clinic of a refugee camp, a genocide officially declared by the United States government itself. And the world's response has been near total silence. This silence is not an accident. It is not simply because Sudan is far away or complicated. It is a choice made by media organizations, by governments, by institutions, and by all of us every time we scroll past a headline about Africa and stop for a headline about Europe. The measure of our shared humanity is not how much we care about people who look like us. It is whether we can find the same urgency, the same tears, and the same anger for people who do not. Sudan is waiting to find out if we can. 400,000 people died. The world was busy.